So let's now introduce our final panel of the day, focused on education, which I think is important, isn't it? Not just for people thinking about putting their schools through the Guernsey education system, but thinking about the young people that Guernsey, fosters, guides, and develops over the years. So please welcome up to the stage for our final discussion, Daniele Harford-Fox, who's the principal of Ladies College, Jenny Palmer, also a principal at Elizabeth College, and Nick Hynes, Director of Education for the States of Guernsey. Welcome to our panel. Thank you very much for being with us and for waiting patiently for the final slots of the day. Nick, I'll come to you first because you are the overarching figure, I guess, when it comes to Guernsey education. You've also worked in the UK. So what can people expect? Is a Guernsey education the same as one in the UK?
Broadly speaking, the qualifications that we do across secondary schools and post-16 are the same qualifications that you would see in the UK and England. Our curriculum is for the Bailiwick of Guernsey, so for Guernsey in particular, and how we deliver that curriculum might look slightly different, but from a qualification perspective, what young people would be accessing is broadly the same.
Jenny, I want to come to you. Perhaps you can tell us, first of all, just a line or two about your school for people who don't know here.
So I'm fortunate enough to be principal at Elizabeth College, and it's a co-ed school now all the way through from 2 to 18. It's the really big building with the turrets that you can see as you come into the harbour, and it's a magical place to be. I was fortunate enough to grow up in Guernsey, so I'm a returner rather than a relocator, and I went to this school for my sixth form. My father was a teacher there, he was a student there as well, and to come back as principal has just been an absolutely amazing experience.
Lots of history when it comes to the school, and I just wonder, how have you perhaps maybe seen things change, seen things evolve over the years?
So it was established by Royal Charter in 1563. So there have been some significant changes,
Yeah.
Even in the 30 years or slightly more since I was there. Becoming co-ed, having a bursary process through year 7 all the way through to year 13. It's a kinder, warmer, brilliant place to belong. And one of the really great features of our school is our Old Elizabethan Association, which has a global reach. So that's a wonderful thing for our students to engage with and belong to as well.
Thank you very much indeed. Danielle, I guess similar to you, tell us a little bit about your school for people who don't know.
Yes, so the Ladies College, it's an all-girls school. It's actually one of the oldest girls' schools in the British Isles, similarly to EC, we've got some of the oldest schools in Guernsey. I think for me, it's been really interesting coming into it. I've worked in a lot of schools in a lot of countries, and I was saying recently to parents, I genuinely think, I don't have a daughter, but if I had a daughter, I would send her to this school. And I think when I think about what that is, and so I hope we'll talk about it, some of it is about being educated on Guernsey, and there are some really powerful and unique things about that. And some of it for me is about this particular school, which just has such a sense of kind of warmth and kindness and delight and bravery and what I call a sprinkle of chaotic joy. So that sense of playfulness and fun, which I think we sometimes lose in education. And some of it is that I think because of the nature of Guernsey, the nature of my governing body is actually quite brave and strategic. And so they're willing for us to ask really big questions about education. And maybe we'll talk more about this, but I am really concerned about whether the current education system in the UK is fit for purpose, given the changes that are happening in the world. And I think in Guernsey, because of the size of us and because of the nature of my board, we're able to really start to innovate in that curriculum and build links with the local community, which maybe we'll get to talk about more. Which I think is one of the super skills of Guernsey.
Nick, to you, in terms of having leaders like we have, education leaders like Jenny, like Danielle as well, in your system, I suppose, does that make your job a little bit easier sometimes, having that sort of high quality level of staff across the island?
I'm really proud of the staff we've got across the whole States of Guernsey, and Jenny and Danielle are our colleagues and work closely with us around creating a really strong education ecosystem for the whole of the community. Different people go to different schools for different reasons, and having that choice and having the breadth of choice from a whole range of different schools, whether it's within the colleges or whether it's within our primary or secondary education system, but also the special education system is really about making sure we can meet the needs of all children and young people, irrespective of what their need might be. And it's really exciting, as Danielle said, really to be able to work in a system where, although the qualifications might look and feel the same in England, how we deliver that and putting the emphasis on the young person in our schools and the opportunities that they have within our school system, which you wouldn't necessarily have in England anymore. I worked in England for 15, 16 years before I moved over to Guernsey, and could see that system changing at that point. And certainly when I come back and see what's happening in England and what's happening in our Guernsey education system, it looks and feels very different.
Jenny, we heard the word opportunities used by Nick there. What do you think are the distinctive opportunities of an education in Guernsey that perhaps maybe you don't get in the UK or elsewhere?
So I spoke to some Year 8 students this week to ask them what had been great since we came back to school this term. And a number of them had been out on a geography field trip and have been up in the north to Fontenelle Bay, which is not a bay that is very much visited, I guess. But it is very pebbly, it's very steep, there's lots of different bits of wildlife and nature going on there. And 4 or 5 of them in the conversations that I had said it was absolutely amazing and they'd never been there before and it was a brilliant day. So it's that opportunity to get out and to study and use the natural environment. And for those of you who are thinking, but it's more insular and are our children going to have the benefits? Well, there's huge numbers of co-curricular activities at Elizabeth College. So many opportunities to go off island. And for our children, the thing that we notice is the growth that they have through year 7s going off on a trip. It's not just about the football trip or the drama trip. It's about how they engage with the world out there. It's about being able to order things in a restaurant that they might not otherwise do. It's about navigating the tube and trains, which we don't have in Guernsey. But it's all about growth and development, and then they get to come back to Guernsey and have a huge amount of freedom and autonomy.
I want to talk to you about independence, Danielle, because it's actually a conversation I'm having with my wife a little bit at the moment with our kids. You know, age 10 and 6, we're in around Oxfordshire, and we're thinking, look, we might need to think about moving somewhere that means they can get on a bus a little bit easier, walk somewhere where they can, you know, have their own independence and gain a bit of what they're going to want from life in the years ahead. But I think having spoken to you before, you've got that independence on your doorstep in Guernsey, haven't you?
Yeah, I think we all know that we're living in a really complicated time as for young people, right? Like, I think we can feel it. There is, you know, the online world, that feeling of, I think sometimes fear almost, that's sort of perpetuating the world a little bit. And I think as parents, often we felt that we have to be much more cautious about what autonomy we can give our children. And I think for me, there was this moment when I came to Guernsey, and the first day when the previous head was showing me around, and I was walking down towards the bathing pools, which we saw Nicole swimming in. And I saw this group of about 10-year-olds on their bikes cycling down to the bathing pools, and there was not an adult near them to be seen. And I thought, gosh, you don't see that anymore. And my childhood, I always say Guernsey for me is like living in the 90s in the best way. Like, my childhood was full of those moments. And I think that we've let go of those moments without realizing the cost of that, right? So when we look at children in Guernsey, they have, because of our confidence in their safety, they have autonomy. They have space where they go out and they are just hanging out with their friends. They have the ability to have adventure, to have space, to build their voice. And I think that has 2 really powerful impacts. Firstly, I genuinely think we've seen a massive rise in the anxiety in young people. If any of you that have children will know that's true. And it is not the same on the island. And we're not saying that we don't have challenges, but you can feel the children can breathe out, that they are not as tense, they are not as worried. But the second piece, I think, is in this moment of incredibly rapid change, where I do think that this generation at the moment is going to perhaps face more change than we have seen in the last 50 or 100 years. Having that sense of confidence in your own ability to navigate the world is incredibly important. And I think that what I see in Guernsey is that the children have much more of that. Because they have that autonomy as children, they are actually much more able to have that sense of agency and confidence, so that when they go out in the world, the world is different, but they have their sense of voice and they know how to navigate it. And I think my sister has just moved from Texas to Guernsey with my nieces, because I absolutely believe, I mean, Texas, obviously, big change, big change. But, you know, I spoke to my 8-year-old niece. I'm not kidding. This literally, I spoke to my 8-year-old niece, and I said to her, after she'd been in Guernsey for 4 weeks, and she's in one of the state primaries, and I said to her, what do you think? How is it different from America? And, how are you finding it? She's like, oh, Annie Danielle, she's American. Annie Danielle is so much better. And she goes, and I just feel so safe. Like, I go out and do these things and I'm not even worried anymore. And you can just see her confidence blooming and her back becoming straighter. And I don't think you can put, we've talked about tax and all those things, but genuinely, if you have children, genuinely, this is something to take seriously.
That must be reassuring for you to hear.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just reflecting on what Danielle said. I moved over to Guernsey when my kids were 3, 6, and 8, and I think my 8-year-old hated me for about 5 days. and after that, the independence and the autonomy that they have, both within school, which we nurture through, with all our schools are rights respecting schools. The children have ability to actually understand and talk about what's happening within their own school, within the curriculum. But my own son, my daughters, you don't see them during the summer. Go out at 9 o'clock on their bike and come back when it's dark, like we used to when we were kids. And that's not to say it's a retrospective state. And people here talk about, it's like the 50s. It might be as safe as that, but actually the opportunities that they have.
There can be some nostalgia in a positive way.
Exactly. And it's, there's no surprise, our curriculums across all our schools, really, I think about, talk about confident individuals, talk about responsible citizens, and really how you nurture and grow that sense of community, not only within the school, but because of the different clubs and societies and commissions that all of the children across the island share, it becomes less important where you go to school, because they all mix across all these different social clubs in the evening, at weekends, which really gives that sense of community. So when they do go on to post-16 or whatever, they're not anxious because they already know each other. And there's these groups which are really strong friendship groups across, irrespective of whatever schools they go to.
There might be people sitting here, of course, listening to all of this and thinking it sounds very encouraging. We should, of course, talk about, results and how things go and, what people go on to do afterwards. What's your sort of take on that, Jenny, in terms of how well students do academically in Guernsey overall and what sort of path they might follow after that?
So I don't think it's that dissimilar to the UK, and there's always a range of outcomes, but there are lots of different opportunities. So if students, once they've done their A-levels, want to stay on the island, there are pathways that actually might be more difficult to access, moving straight into work, apprenticeships in the finance sector. A lot of our students go to university, of course, but we value all pathways, and we all have a broad range of students with different abilities. And actually what's successful for one student may perhaps look different. And we have had some amazing personal success stories for students, which if you necessarily looked at their grade outcomes wouldn't reflect the absolutely amazing journey that they'd been on. And that is a really powerful thing in the schools that we have. Really good pastoral care, helping students to remove those obstacles, using that alumni link, and so much input from local businesses. They give up so much of their time. They're willing to come and talk to students. There are pathways for everyone, and I think that is a very special thing.
Danielle, what would you say as far as sort of, the extracurricular side of things is concerned on Guernsey? Because I know Jenny was talking a bit about some of the, the recent geography field trip. Are things really a little bit contained to the island itself? Do you see some of your students go elsewhere and off island explore and do different extracurricular things?
Yes, you absolutely do that. And we all, I think all the school districts have trips abroad, as Jenny has talked about, and we play sport. We just beat some people in the Southwest, in sport.
And Jersey.
Yeah, but Jersey, we're definitely competing with Jersey. So yeah, we do all those things. But I think what's important, so I think we offer across our schools that everything you would see in the best schools in the UK get offers on the island, right? So like you can do everything you can imagine. I've been in some of the top public schools. We do all of those things. I do want to pick up on what Jenny said, though, because I think there are things that are available in Guernsey that are almost impossible to access in the UK. So firstly, seconding what Nick says about bringing children together. So for example, in Guernsey, and John talked earlier about music, we have the music centre in Guernsey, which is every Saturday morning. So that from the beginning in the schools in every primary school child is trained on an instrument. And then as they go up through the schools, they come together on Saturdays and play in quartets and orchestras. And genuinely, that orchestra, I think John and I talked about, it is as good as the National Youth Orchestra. It's absolutely outstanding. And again, it's children from across all of the schools working together. So that's a perfect example. But the other piece for me that is exceptional, which I just don't think we talk about enough, is what sort of Jenny was alluding to, which is our ability to work with industry. So for example, in my world, and there are things that cut across all the schools, but in my world, as I said, I am worried about the impact that AI is going to have on the types of roles that our young people are going into. And so we've been able to, because we're in Guernsey, we've been able to build what we call our Pathways Partners, which is working with Specsavers and PwC, universities like Oxford and UCL, and local business leaders, and work together on curriculum. And that's allowed us to start to fray the edges of the schools. But there are all sorts of opportunities. So, for example, you take the Institute of Directors, right, the IOD. which exists in lots of countries. But in Guernsey, there's a program for all of us children where they're able to shadow directors because of how the community will work together. So they get our students, our sixth form students, can spend the summer and they'll go and shadow a director of an organisation in one of these top organisations. They'll go into all of their personal meetings. They'll have every kind of experience, and then they present back to the business community what they've learned about leadership, and then they win various awards. And every year we see students. I know there are students in the UK in my old schools who go to top universities in order to try and get in front of these top organisations. But actually what happens in Guernsey is those top organisations know all of our sixth formers and will try and grab them straight at 18. And so the opportunity they have to go straight into like what when I was in school in the 90s, called the milk round. The milk round in Guernsey happens at 18. Those organisations know those students and they develop their talent straight from 18. So those kinds of opportunities, I think, are almost impossible to access unless you're in the most privileged position in the UK. But in Guernsey, I think it is much more straightforward for children to access.
Yes, that small environment, that small island
it's
can produce big
community.
benefits. I want to talk to you about well-being. You touched on it earlier, Danielle, that sort of social media challenges people might have concerns with, because I'm sure there'll be people here thinking, well, look, I've either got children who are going to be on social media soon, or they're in it right now, or they've been in it in the last couple of years. What do you say about what Guernsey is doing on that front? And is it indeed an advantage being a small island where maybe you can be a little bit more agile, maybe you can be a bit decisive and not follow exactly what the UK is doing, make some bold moves to keep your students safe and happy and support their well-being?
I mean, we have a massive focus on mental health and well-being, as they do across all the schools. And there's an Island Children and Young People Wellbeing Survey, a mental health and wellbeing survey as part of a broader thing that we do with public health. We also do a number of teacher tap, which is checking on a whole range of different things for parents, for students, and for teachers themselves about mental health and well-being, about behaviours, about what's happening in schools, and use that to try and think about what we need to do differently or better. And because we're smaller, I oversee 10 primary schools, 3 special schools, post-16 and some secondary schools. We can be agile and we can make sure that our education strategy reflects what people are telling us. We don't necessarily have to go through a bureaucratic process to start thinking about what we need to do as a result of what children and young people have told us. And those schools have greater autonomy to get that feedback separately themselves and think about what the young people, what are parents telling us, how do we need to act on this to improve what we're already doing. And I think, to build on what Danielle and Jenny are saying, I think it's very easy to get drawn into looking at outcomes at the very top level for all of our children and young people. And certainly when you look at the outcomes that all of our establishments deliver, they're better or at least in line with what you would see across the UK. But, there's a whole range of different learners across our island who have lots of different activities and lots of different pathways which just aren't accessible in England anymore, without special educational needs or our apprenticeship program. We've got 400 full-time apprentices on Guernsey who are doing trades, who are doing childcare, who are doing a whole range of different things in the workplace and getting paid through the employer at the same time.
So the opportunities are there.
Absolutely.
Jenny, I just want to give you the opportunity to maybe tell us a little bit something about whether it is about social media or just sort of well-being in general. You mentioned pastoral care earlier. How do you approach that at your school?
So well-being's at the heart of everything, because if people are happy and they're well looked after, then they're more likely to learn effectively and to build relationships and to feel that sense of belonging. I'm just going to touch on what both Nick and Danielle have said about Guernsey and the opportunities, but I am going to reflect as well that Guernsey punches above its weight in so many different ways. So we have Olympic athletes, we have people who are shooting in the Athlings team. We have 3 this year out of 8 who are Guernsey children. There are so many opportunities in Guernsey, but that doesn't sort of cut people off from that bigger global piece. And looking after people, ensuring that well-being, and tackling those thorny issues which inevitably our children today, with social media and being so much more connected, do experience. Actually, it's about everybody looking after each other and themselves, and you find that a lot in Guernsey.
Thanks very much. We have got time just for a question or two. If anyone here would like to put a question to any of our education leaders here, do we have any hands in the air? I have gentlemen at the front. Thank you very much. Natalie will bring that microphone over.
Hello. I was just interested in what your early years provision is for younger children.
Yep.
I don't know if one of you wants to take that one on.
Yes. So at the moment, there's a 15 hours provision for all our preschool children. We have a private-public partnership with all of our providers. So you can choose what provider you go to, and your young person, preschool, we get 15 hours free. We're currently talking to our politicians and our committees across a whole range of different areas to look about how we might be able to extend that provision, either through a targeted support programme or looking into what that might mean for additional hours free at source of parents at 2 to 3 as well. So at the moment, it's 15 hours as opposed to 30 in England, but it's something that's under review because it has so many positive drivers from an economic, social and educational perspective.
Okay, so there might be some movement on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been really helpful. I've got grandchildren now, and my question is concerning them, if they come and join us in Guernsey, if we go. I've really enjoyed everything you said. The ethos of the schooling there sounds fantastic, but my concern is sex education. What they're teaching children from 7 years old here is just, so shocking. What is your policy on sex education in Guernsey?
Okay, I wonder if either Danielle or Jenny want to come in on that, whether you have a certain specific approach at your schools on that front, or does the sex education that you put in, or is that one for Nick? I just wonder.
I think it's a really interesting question. And I would say that we do follow policies. We do look to be being proportionate and sensible. And I know there have been lots of stories in the media about certain lessons and focuses which haven't been, I guess, considered appropriate. We share our RSE policies. Our governing boards oversee those. We share them with our parents. And we do have an open dialogue about that. So we haven't had those particular issues, certainly not in my experience.
Open dialogue is important. Thank you very much indeed. We've probably got time for one more if we do have one more question in the room. Just looking around.
A demographic question for you. How many children are there on the island? Any idea?
Yes, so I think there's probably about 8,500 within full-time education. There's approximately 600 per year group within states education. So it's probably about 750 across the whole island. I think it's 8,500 in full-time education across the island.
I'm putting you on the spot a little bit. Is there a sort of a percentage of how many of those children are in, sort of independent or private schools versus states education? Do you know what that rough breakdown might be?
I think there's about 11% in primary school and about 30% within secondary school.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, hopefully that answers some of our questions in the room, and I believe everybody here is hopefully be hanging around for another perhaps hour. So any questions, please do visit the team out in the hall. I'm hoping we can just put back up on the screen the various stands where Jenny, Nick and Danielle will be situated. If you want to ask some further questions, some really good conversations about well-being, which we all care greatly about. So please do keep those going. Thank you very much, Jenny, Nick and Danielle from our education panel.